Things happen in everyday life. We go to the store, we buy things, but anytime we buy something, we go through some mental gymnastics, albeit maybe at the subconscious level of, is this worth it? It's very complex, actually. We look at the price of something and decide in our mind, how much work did I have to do to earn enough money to buy this? Well, what impacts the price of something? Well, two things. In the secular world, the economic model of supply and demand. That's one thing, supply and demand. As there is an abundance of supply, price tends to go down. Okay, and if there is a scarcity of something, well, the price tends to go up. But it really goes beyond that, because we have to consider the utility of it, regardless of supply, demand, and even price. If it's something that we don't need or won't use, it really doesn't matter what the price of it is. On the other hand, if you desperately need something, price consideration goes out the window. You will pay quite a premium for something based on its utility having little to do with supply and demand. What I'm trying to get us to think about here today, and what I'd like to share with you today, is there is a difference between value, cost, and worth. And there are some things that just absolutely break that model, and I'd like to share a little bit about it today. We're going to look at several items that have a value far beyond any explanation of supply, demand, or utility. I know what you're thinking. You're wondering, what is that behind me and why is it back there? Well, I can't wait to tell you. 40 years ago, this jacket was awarded to me as a high school senior. It is my varsity letter jacket. Folks, in today's money, that jacket is probably valued at around $100. Back then, it was probably half that, but still, it could be easily replaced. As a jacket, it's a decent jacket. It will keep you warm. The funny thing is, if I were to use that jacket for its intended purpose, I would need to lose about 30 pounds. If you were to reach for my jacket, you would in fact pull back a bloody nub. You see, that's my varsity jacket that was awarded to me, and I know the sacrifice that it took to earn that jacket, and no one is going to wear that jacket other than me. You see, that jacket, although valued at about $100, is absolutely priceless to me. You know, I once worked in radio, and in radio we would get phone calls with requests. And funny thing about requests, they never requested the popular songs of the day. By and large, the requests were for some oldie. Have you ever been listening to the radio and an old song comes on and you just say, oh, I love that song, and it just does something to you inside? Well, it's just a song. You know, at the time that song was produced, it rose up the charts, but then a funny thing happened. It fell down the charts. No song stays at the top of the list forever. They fade away. Why do we so love those songs? Well, we tend to romanticize the past, don't we? You know, when that song plays, we're reminded of things as they were at the time that song was popular. Perhaps a girlfriend or a boyfriend, perhaps a summer at the beach, perhaps in the mountains, a time when life was simpler, less complex, happier. Well, we tend to romanticize the past, but that song is not valued in terms of its popularity or its profitability. It is valued based on how much you love it. Napoleon is credited and quoted as saying, "A soldier will fight long and hard for a bit of colored ribbon." Well, just like the varsity letter jacket, when you think about the decoration of a soldier, it is literally just, as Napoleon said, a bit of ribbon, of colored ribbon. What does it cost? Well, the cost of production of that surely can't be very much. But it is awarded to soldiers for intrepid effort. It is rewarded to soldiers for sacrifice. It is rewarded to soldiers for valor. Folks, you cannot put a price on intrepidity. Is that a word? You cannot put a value on bravery, courage, value. Yet we all hold them in high esteem. Why? Is the soldier, the person, worth any more than other soldiers on the field? I think if you will look at the testimony of those soldiers who have received the highest honor, the Congressional Medal of Honor, each and every time they simply say they did their job, they did what any other soldier on the battlefield would have done given the opportunity. Yet we value it so highly. You know, I'm kind of a car buff, but even if you aren't, certainly there are a lot of cars out there, a lot of different kinds of cars, and ranging in price from rather economical to extremely, extremely expensive. What is the difference? Well, let's think about let me think of a great car. Look at a 1967 restored Ford Mustang. Wow. What a beautiful car. The car, I don't know what the value of those cars would be, what their price would be, a restored 1967 Mustang, but I can assure you that it is extremely high beyond any explanation of supply, demand, or utility. You see, the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, it's only a car. It is transportation. It's used to get you from point A to point B. But in similar fashion to the oldie, that song that reminds you of some great summer you spent with, and fill in the blank, the Ford Mustang iconizes that American prosperity, that age of youth and prosperity and hopefulness and optimism like nothing else. You see, we romanticize the past. We probably didn't feel that way as we were living through it. But certainly today, when we see that restored 1967 Ford Mustang, and we see the detail and the effort that was put into it, you see, its value goes far beyond any explanation of utility. It has value far beyond its worth. Yeah, I'm not much into the Hollywood celebrity scene. When I pass by a television playing E.T. or whatever those shows are, I pretty much find somewhere else to go. But you know, I certainly do remember growing up at a time when Elvis was the popular icon of music. And, you know, after he died, decades later, his music survives and is cherished to this day. Well, whether it's Elvis or some other celebrity, from time to time, the celebrity, even posthumously, their estate will hold an auction. And simple everyday items that belong to that celebrity are auctioned off for prices that are mind-boggling. Who on earth would pay millions of dollars for any garment? Well, obviously the garment, the shirt, coat, shoes, whatever, cannot possibly be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. There is no logical explanation based on supply, demand, or utility that accounts for that price. So why then do people willingly and joyfully pay extraordinary amounts of money for ordinary objects? Folks, there is a reason. You know, it has been my honor and my pleasure to have served as the disaster relief director in the Florida Baptist Association. There are many stories that I could share with you, but I wanted to share with you some thoughts having to do with our topic today of cost, value, and worth. We would go to a home that has been destroyed by a hurricane, for example, and of course we would try to rebuild that home, and we would try to salvage the contents and clean it up. And the owner of the home was always distressed. And we would be trying to fix things up and get things cleaned up and get the mud out and trying to bring some sense of joy and fulfillment back into their lives. But the things that we could restore didn't bring true satisfaction, true restoration, true joy back into their life. Sometimes we would be taking some trash out, the rubbish, the debris out to the road, and we would pick something up, and the owner would come crying and saying, "Don't take that." You know, and I look at it and it's like a broken picture frame, and you know, well, it's a picture. It has some sentimental value to the owner. And there were some things that were lost that grieved them so deeply there was no way to comfort them, because the thing they lost had sentimental value. Its value in terms of money is negligible. But I think we all know what is meant when we say sentimental value. If you were to lose that in a fire, in a flood, in a hurricane, or anything else, there's no amount of compensation, there is no amount of insurance money that will restore that gap, that hole in your heart that is left by the loss of an item that has sentimental value. Okay, we've looked at varsity football jackets, we've talked about oldies, we've talked about a 67 Ford Mustang, we've talked about Elvis, we've talked about items lost of sentimental value. What's my point? The point is this: everything has been expressed in terms of cost, in terms of value, and in terms of worth. But in each of those cases, there is a huge gap between what something costs and what something is valued at and what it is worth. Utility. What are we worth as human beings? Well, you know, God created mankind as the crowning achievement of his creation. So clearly, from that alone, there's an implied worth from the sovereign God. In terms of utility, how much does God need me, or you, or anybody else? Well, the truth of the matter is, God doesn't need us whatsoever. You know, in our own lives, we struggle to bring worth. You know, I mean, in legacy. I want to leave this world better than I found it. And I think many share the same view. But I don't care how much I do. No amount of good that I can do, the scripture says that the best of our works are as dirty rags to God. So what are we worth to God? Well, he doesn't need us. We're not worth much. Yet, he sent his son, Jesus Christ, to die on a cross to redeem us, to restore fellowship with him. In all of the examples that we've gone over today, I can explain that gap very easily. It's hard to quantify, but you explain the gap by love. Now, how do you measure love? Well, that gets a little tricky, but I can assure you this. The measure of love is the measure of sacrifice. Think about the sacrifice and the cost that was paid for us when God sent His own Son to die for our sin. That makes us worth a lot, doesn't it?